Okay, it's 7 o'clock. Welcome everyone to the September 15th meeting of the Los Gatos Town Council. We'll start with a roll call.
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Rennie.
Here.
Councilmember Sayoc.
Here.
Vice Mayor Spector.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Jensen.
Here. Thank you all for joining us tonight. The first item that we always do on our agenda is reports out from council members and our town manager regarding any committees or events of note to report out to the council and the community, which occurred since our last meeting. So I am going to start with Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. I was so concentrating on our agenda, I didn't write this down ahead of time. So just quickly, the VTA Governance and Audit Committee met, and the VTA Board met earlier in the month. The Conceptual Development Advisory Committee also met with Councilmember Sack, and the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Board of Directors met. Looks like that is it of all the items I was doing since the last council meeting.
Thank you. Councilmember Sack.
Thank you, Mayor. Since we last met, Cities Association had their board meeting. At that time, there was a presentation by VTA Public Advisory Board on 85 and how that pertains to Los Gatos and the work that the West Valley has been doing in that regard. We also had a presentation on bicycle and pedestrian efforts around Santa Clara County. And Cities Association just continues to have their Saturday calls with Supervisor Chavez and Simidian on this pandemic and efforts that are happening at a county basis.
Thank you. Vice Mayor. You don't show mute, but we can't hear you. Maybe do mute, go off, go on, try clicking your computer, maybe. Now you're on mute for sure.
It's not a mute thing.
Oh, there you go. Now I can hear you.
God,
Yep.
you're so good. You should be an engineer.
No, I shouldn't.
All right, since our last council meeting, I attended the West Valley Solid Waste Authority Board meeting, the West Valley Clean Water Authority Board meeting, the General Plan Advisory Committee meeting, the Police Reform Community meeting, and the county COVID calls. Thank you.
Thank you. And on behalf of myself and staff, all council attended our meeting last week, the community regarding policing. We had 82 participants at one point, really good participation and great constructive conversation that we'll follow up on tonight. I also was at the GPAC meeting and the VTA PAC meeting this week, and have had various calls, planning, debriefing, etc. So I'll go to Ms. Pravetti.
Thank you very much and good evening. A couple of things to report. We are continuing our series on community conversations. The next one is scheduled for Tuesday, September 29th, and we'll be talking about housing for all, affordable housing. And then in late October, we will be having a more general conversation around community culture. So please join us. Those will all be on Zoom, and they're being publicized on the town's website and through social media. In addition, we have started our board and commission recruitment for the fall for all existing vacancies. Applications are due on November 6th, and the town council will be interviewing and appointing candidates on the 17th of November. So please sign up. There's some great opportunities. In addition, the town continues to look at how we can provide municipal services during the COVID pandemic. And just last weekend, the library started its Saturday curbside service. So now it runs Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. So please get those orders in, and we'll be happy to complete them for you. It's been a very successful program given the air quality. We are monitoring it very carefully, and if we get to very unhealthy levels, we may need to close down the library. So always please call first. And if we are closed, then you can always call us for live chat and also talk to a librarian to answer any questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Privetti. I'm going to give everyone who hasn't perhaps participated with us before on Zoom this little brief overview about how the meeting will go. The next item we're going to consider is consent items. These are generally things that are not controversial, that can be approved in a single motion, and so are considered together. That being said, any member of the council can pull an item from consent, and any member of the public can pull an item of consent by raising your hand on your Zoom participant bar and raising your little electronic hand. I'll see it, and you can pull an item. If an item is pulled, we'll just hear it in its normal order. After we do our consent items, we'll move on to our verbal communications, when anyone can speak to us about something that is not on the agenda. And tonight's agenda is basically covering a request from the Chamber of Commerce for money for a program they want to put on, and discussion about police, both reform services budget and potential salary per our legal obligations to negotiate in good faith. So that said, I'm going to move to, and anytime in the other business that you raise your hand, I should say verbal communications, you have 3 minutes to speak. It's not on the agenda, so there won't be an interactive conversation. When we get to other items or public hearings, participants get 3 minutes to speak. After the council has asked questions and there's been a staff presentation, you only get 1 opportunity to speak. We may ask you questions, so please wait for that. When everyone who wants to speak has done so, we'll close the hearing and look to the council for a discussion or motions. Okay, so given that, we're going to move to our consent calendar, which consists of 4 items tonight. Does any member of the council wish to pull an item from consent? Seeing no one, does anyone in the public, by raising your hand, and if you're on a phone, it's #9, want to pull an item from the consent calendar? I don't see anyone, so I'm going to look to the council for a motion on the consent calendar. Councilwoman Sayoc.
I move to approve items 1 through 4 in the consent.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by the Vice Mayor. I'm going to call the question. As always, during Zoom meetings, we do a roll call vote. So Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Councilwoman Sayoc?
Yes.
Councilman Rennie?
Yes.
And the mayor votes yes, so it passes unanimously. So we will move on to verbal communications. And as I said, this is a time when members of the public can talk to us about something that's not on our agenda tonight. So if you'd like to do that, raise your hand and we'll give you 3 minutes to speak. And the first person I see with their hand up is Rob Stump. And when I do call on you, just unmute yourself and start talking. We'll let you know if we can't hear you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. As you know, my name is Rob Stump, and I'm a hillside resident of Los Gatos. I'm here this evening to further respond to a question that was asked of me at the September 1st Town Council meeting. The question was about immediate actions the town should take in response to the CZU lightning complex fire and also the August 23rd and 24th red flag warning. Excuse me. Since my recommendations have also been submitted in writing, I'll just provide a summary. First, establish an ad hoc wildfire preparation and prevention committee now. We can get this committee up and running by early October. We need to get more people involved. We need to ensure that town public safety priorities are more focused and aligned on wildfire prevention. There is still much education, awareness building, and work that needs to be accomplished. Second, continue efforts to expedite the roadside fire fuel reduction plan. Fully support Director Morley's work to engage multiple contractors so that fuel reduction can be completed as soon as possible. Make sure that he has the needed support and resources to get this critical work done. Third, conduct defensible space inspections in the very high fire hazard zone throughout Los Gatos. Mobilize community volunteers, perhaps even CERT members, to inspect hillside properties and educate homeowners. We have a history. We have more fuel on our hillside right now than at any other point in our town's history, although we are seeing progress as you look up into the hills. Adherence to defensible space requirements across our hillside will make a difference, and it is the law. Fourth, conduct emergency evacuation drills to test our ability to evacuate our hillsides safely and efficiently. They will allow residents to experience evacuation under controlled conditions. The Civic Center Hillside neighborhood is currently planning an evacuation drill with the police department. The drill will give everyone a better idea of what is involved in an immediate evacuation. Residents, the police department, and Santa Clara County Fire Department. The lessons learned from this drill can be applied to the entire Los Gatos hillside. By taking these actions, it'll demonstrate a heightened level of intensity around our community's response to wildfire. It is a threat that we live with and we know 8 to 9 months of the year. And as we have sadly witnessed, it is becoming an all too common occurrence. By working together, we can and will make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stump. Are there any questions for the speaker? Ms. Spector?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Stump, I listened to you. I read your memo that you submitted. The question I have of you, and maybe of staff also, but a question I have of you is, let's assume that I think fire danger is a big priority for our town. Let's assume I think your ideas sound good. What are your thoughts on the fact that we have competing interests as amongst staff, and the action items that you have, as I read them, involve staff?
Certainly it involves staff, but I think it can involve them to a lesser degree. And that's why I'm all for getting more community involvement. More people that will be taking responsibilities, such as the Civic Center Hillside neighborhood. We're taking leadership, we're doing things, we're informing the town of what we are doing to make sure that we are working together, but we're not asking the town to necessarily support us other than this evacuation drill. Obviously, we can't do something like this on our own because of the public safety issues, even with the idea of running an evacuation drill. But certainly, Vice Mayor, I'm really sensitive to that. You cannot do everything, but I do think that we can bring additional people to bear that will take less staff time than, I shouldn't say, well, not as much staff time as it could if we looked at this as a fully staff supported effort.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Stump? Thank you very much, Mr. Stump.
Thank you.
Does anyone else, I don't see any hands raised. Does anyone else want to talk to us about something that's not on the agenda? And as always, I just give it a couple seconds to make sure that you can get your hand up. I don't see anyone. Madam Vice Mayor.
Thank you. And go to the question of staff. Given what was just stated, is any part of that realistic for the staff to work with the community on this fire issue?
Yes, thank you, Vice Mayor, and if I may, Mayor, you will see on your October 6th agenda the appointment of a ad hoc committee to address wildfire. We're still in the process of identifying community members and members of the town council to join us. But in talking with the mayor, she has agreed to set up this ad hoc committee very quickly, and it would be expected to complete its work by the December 1st council meeting. It would be essentially a roadmap for what investments and activities the town should be doing in collaboration with the community. So we're looking forward to the council's consideration of the ad hoc and then supporting the ad hoc in its work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pavetti. Good summary. That's exactly what we talked about. There's nothing further. I'm going to move on to our business for tonight, public hearings. And the first item is number 5. And I'm not sure, is that going to be Ms. Pavetti? Okay. Our staff report. Thank you.
Thank you. So a couple of months ago, the chamber did reach out to the town manager's office with a proposal for enlivening the downtown during the holiday season with a light display. And we mentioned to the chamber that we would be happy to bring the proposal forward to the council once we had a better sense as to what the proposal consisted of. Last week, we received the PowerPoint slides, which are included with the staff report. And in addition, so we have some idea of what the project is, but as mentioned in the staff report, there's still a fair amount of unknowns. And so should the council want us to move forward, we would need to work very closely with the chamber to understand all of the logistics that would be involved with the installation, working with private properties, et cetera. I know the chamber is here this evening to talk to you more specifically about the proposal. So I will not do that for you now. I do want to raise to your attention the desk item that Mr. Morley presented from our Parks and Public Works Department, talking about some of the trade-offs with some of our other seasonal work that we do in the fall and winter time. But as I say, should council direct us to move forward and work with the chamber, we'll do our best to balance priorities, including vegetation management, with the lighting proposal. So we are available. The staff team is here to support you in your discussion, and we also look forward to the public testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pavetti. Ms. Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Clarification for me on the budget source that's referenced in the report. I saw a mention of economic recovery budget. I think that's what was recommended, but also the downtown streetscape revitalization. Could you tell me what the distinction is and how much is in each of those funds?
They're actually the same fund. So if you recall, we were very eager to support our local business community last fiscal year. And so we actually transformed and reallocated the downtown streetscape program into an economic recovery fund. So it's one and the same. That budget is approximately 1.9. Council has expended or asked to set aside about $100,000 or so to put in the temporary parklets, which you now see throughout the downtown area. On October 6th, we'll be coming back to the town council with some additional ideas as we head into the winter months. We have some concepts for your consideration. They will likely cost money as well, as particularly if we extend the lease arrangement for the K-rail. But we still have an ample budget, and so we may be able to do more than one type of effort. So when the chamber saw that we had funds available in the Economic Recovery Fund, they thought that their proposal to enliven downtown for the holidays met the spirit of economic recovery. And that's really the policy question before you tonight.
All right, thank you. Let me ask you, can you hear me? Because I just got a note saying that you can't hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Ms. Saya?
Similar question to Ms. Pavetti. So in the staff report, there's two recommendations. Well, there's two options in the conclusion: fund the entire project and fund a portion. Do those two options correlate with the budget costs? Because one indicates with PPW, one without.
So there's probably lots of different options. We just spelled out 3 for your consideration, since there's probably other ways that we could partner with the chamber, but it seemed that there were at least 3 options very, very clearly, which one would be, of course, fund the entire project, have our town staff do the installation. This would entail buying the lights, storing them, breaking the light displays down, putting it all away, et cetera, getting it out again the next year, et cetera. So there would be some costs associated with that. We don't have a storage cost yet. We don't know exactly how we would store all of these materials. As you know, we've been working on a capital program for quite some time for our corporation yard. So maybe later on this evening, Director Morley can fill you in on that. The second is the council may say, this is a great idea, but because of other issues or potential investments that we might want to make in economic recovery, the town council is willing to spend X amount of money towards the project. And that would be, again, entirely at your discretion. You could determine, yes, we're going to buy and store the lights, or yes, we're going to use our town staff for the installation, but it's going to be up to the chamber to buy the project. So there's a lot of ways to kind of mix and match the different options depending upon the direction that council wants to go. And then, of course, the third option is not to fund it at all. So there's always that option as well, which preserves the funds for other economic recovery actions, as well as ultimately any leftover money would go back into that downtown streetscape project.
And
Ms.
to
Sack?
follow up, if I may. So Ms. Pravetti, then with the, and I appreciate that there's more options available. So is it staff's recommendation then to put a monetary amount? Because it sounds like there's two things that still need to be determined. The storage, so the full cost, and how much time actually will go into it, according to Director Morley's. So it sounds like you're looking for authorization, but are you looking for a ceiling as well?
If that's the direction of council, we need to have parameters. At this point, it's a very open-ended proposal. Staff actually has no recommendation on this. This is coming to you from a very neutral place. And so we're here to answer your questions, facilitate your discussion as best as possible, but just recognize that there are still some unknowns, such as storage, utilities, working with property owners, potential permitting issues, et cetera. So should the council be interested in supporting this, having parameters such as a maximum budget, maximum staff hours, those types of parameters would be very helpful.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
I actually have a question. I could very well be getting ahead of the game here by asking it now, but I'm going to ask it. Ms. Pravetti, you mentioned that we're going to have a more comprehensive meeting regarding economic recovery on October 6th. There's been a lot of what ifs, ands, or buts in association with what's being proposed. Does it make sense to incorporate this request into that larger meeting?
That's another
And
option.
again,
Yeah, that is certainly another option for council consideration. I would just suggest, however, that if the council is inclined to support the chamber at some level, that, here we are at mid-September, the holidays are going to be here before we know it. So there is still a lot of work to actually get this up and going in time for the holidays. So I think the sooner the chamber knows the level of commitment or partnership that the town is interested in, the easier it will be for all of us to proceed. But continuance to October 6th, when you can consider all of the other economic recovery ideas, is also an option for you.
okay, thank you. Other questions? Okay, I do not see any questions, so I'm going to open it to members of the public. And the first person is Catherine Summers.
Good evening, Council. My name is Catherine Summers. I'm with the Los Gatos Chamber of Commerce, of course. And am I ever excited to be here this evening? We all know that it's kind of hard to get excited about much these days. So here goes. Lights, and may they be spectacular. Cameras for those Instagram and Facebook posts, and lots of action, but not just any kind of action. May it be a unique experience, a way to get out, and a way to visit our charming downtown safely, physically distanced and masked up. We need action like this to get through this dark COVID winter that is unfortunately ahead of us. The Chamber recently said goodbye to the Los Gatos You'll Love It holiday campaign. It was a great last 4 years, but the wreaths always died. And we had a hard time. It was really just time to do something different. The town's businesses and our residents are ready for something fresh, a new vibe, a new energy, and a fresh look. In looking at other options, we knew we wanted something non-denominational. I've even talked to Federal Realty in Old Town about the possibilities of what we can do, and I think they'll follow our lead. We also took into account a few of the comments that we've heard from the Anti-Racist Coalition and wanted to be sure that whatever we did was more welcoming and inclusive than it has ever been before. We wanted this to be a celebration. We talked to business owners and residents, young and old, and all are pretty keen on this concept, partly because it is one that we can build on over the next few years. It's a good investment. I'm sure that you've been following the news reports. Yesterday, the San Francisco Chronicle reported that 2,000 Bay Area businesses, including restaurants, have permanently closed because of the COVID pandemic. Later in the day, Yelp came out in staggering statistics saying that 55% of small businesses nationwide will not make it another 6 months if the situation does not improve. It's our responsibility to help our businesses. In Los Gatos alone, we have 12 empty storefronts and more are coming. Many more that I know are holding on by their shoestrings. They need our help and they need it soon. I think right now, Los Gatos, we've set an example with our pop-up patios. Let's do it again. I'll be honest, I don't know if Los Gatos and Lights is going to save them all, but I do believe that this project will bring people to town to shop, to dine, to drink, and to play. And I do know that our business community and our residents alike are counting on us and really appreciate this risk that we are taking. So thank you for considering our proposal this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Summers. Any questions? Ms. Sayak.
Thanks, Catherine. Two quick questions. First of all, I love the idea and the creativity, so thank you. So the first question, in your proposal, it mentioned that you would also be looking on the north side, Highway 9 and another on the boulevard. So I'm assuming then that you've talked to some of the private landowners on that side and maybe incorporating and having a consistent theme, but could you confirm?
Yes, Linda Lester and I have spoken extensively about the possibilities, what might go on her corner right there. She's so excited. And I just think right there, and then as well, and possibly the Zanardi, I've talked to them as well, you know, where the big cats are and, you know, doing something there. There's even maybe a couple other places that we could look at, even out in the Harwood part, you know, out in the Harwood area. Gatos. I mean, I think it's just really a time that we could bring the whole town together and everybody feels unified and part of something that is bigger than all this mess that we're in.
Thank you. And then the second question, you heard my questions of staff with regard to the budget. So I understand that it's still a preliminary budget, but based on what you've submitted, could you just explain when it says total using PPW and then using outside contractor? So when you prepared this, when you were thinking of an outside contractor, that would be someone to install, to store. Can you just clarify exactly?
Yes.
In this budget, the difference between the two?
So we've vetted a few different companies, and Randy, my colleague here at the office, is going to, you know, talk a little bit more in depth about this and the options that we have for payment. The lights themselves are about $100,000. The $50,000 that we have in there is either that we could pay a technician to come, that comes with the company, and they can come and they'll do it all for us. Or we've met with Matt Morley and we realize that he's so busy at that time of year and all the time actually, that, you know, if he believes that his staff can do it and we can use that money for cost recovery, then we'll put it in for that. Otherwise, you know, and it really is up to Laurel and he determining what's the best use of his time. Otherwise, we can hire the company. So that's why we have that $50,000 extra in there, you know, kind of just in case for the installation and for the storage that, you know, and the breakdown. Yeah.
Okay. So then the extra 50,000, then the 144, that includes storage?
Yes, we believe it does. I mean, we have not, so to Laurel's point, we don't exactly know how much storage will cost, but we think we have been generous in our ask, I guess. We've been, you know, we've over asked. I think $150,000 will cover everything that will be included in this. And I think we can make it work within that budget. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can't tell. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, good. Catherine.
Yes.
You answered part of my question, but I'm going to drill down a little bit. The general question is, are you making this request for downtown or for throughout the town? You have mentioned verbally and in the report, there's a mention of Leicester Square. So is the ask for the lights throughout the town or just downtown or what?
So I think if you look at the proposal, there are 8 to 10 installations that we have identified where we'd like to put them. Leicester Square is definitely one of them. Linda Lester is one of our huge supporters of the Chamber of Commerce and always sponsors the carriage rides, for example, and has always wanted to do something on that corner to bring the boulevard into the whole scope of town. And so she is 100% on board to do this there. And again, as I had mentioned earlier, we'd like to do it in a few other places as well to really create that unity and togetherness during, you know, this crazy winter that's coming. So amongst all of us, I think that's really important, and that's definitely part of the proposal that we're doing it all over town.
So when you talk about 100,000, as you were just testifying about 100,000, and then a separate amount of 50,000, does that amount of money cover the entire town or just downtown?
The entire town. That is the lights themselves is the 100,000 for all over town. It's not a ton. Again, it's 8 installations. We can build on those in the years to come for sure. And add to them if it's successful. The 50,000 is really, again, it was the padding that we wanted to put on, depending on what Matt and Laurel decided amongst themselves, whether or not our PPW should do it or whether or not we should have the technician come in and do it. The technician will come in and show Matt and his staff what to do. So maybe they do it this year, and next year, you know, Matt and crew take over. From what we've heard, it's complicated. It's not that complicated, but that's all over town that we will, you know, that we'll work with the technician or we'll work with PPW or we'll work with a combination of both.
On the last page of the staff report, there are options. Now, Ms. Pravetti indicated that there could be more options, but as amongst the options that are in the staff report, do you have a recommendation?
Well, yes, I do. And thank you so much for asking. I would be really honest. This is an all or nothing deal. The town council has to decide to do this in entirety or not, because the chamber right now, we are holding on by shoestrings as well, and are so happy that so many of our members do keep sending in their membership dues, but we can't, we don't have the money to really do any of this, with the exception of putting it together, presenting it to you, and making sure that we see it through. And we can do all the marketing for it, for sure, but we can't pay for the lights or the installation.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay, I have a question. Ms. Summers, my question to Ms. Pravetti was really focused on the fact that on October 6th, we're going to have a more comprehensive discussion of economic recovery in the town. And the money that we set aside out of what used to be the downtown streetscape fund of the 1.9 million, we spent some money already on parklets. This is a request to come out of that same fund. And I appreciate your honesty in your ask. So I'm asking for honesty now. Is that my concern is that we keep taking funds out of this of having a comprehensive plan. Is this your ask for now, or do you plan to come back and ask for another piece when we get to October 6th?
That's your usual question, but
that is. Okay. We knew it was coming, so we got a good answer. Then,
I have a good answer, and in fact, I was teed up for this question. And believe it or not, I think that this is not just a COVID recovery project. I think this fits in nicely with the streetscape plan. And so I think it's part of it. Will I come back, as you see on maybe one of the last slides, and I don't know if Aaron can put it back up. There were a few really cool installations that for one, weren't available this year. One of them was the big globes that you might have noticed at the end, which are in your packet. Those weren't available. What I would like to do, if it's successful, is yes, next year I'm coming back and I'm going to say, you know what? We did such a great thing. Yes, that one. Thank you, Aaron. We did such a great, or had such a great run last year, and everyone loved it. And people came from far and wide and, to town to see what we were doing. And so, yes, every year for maybe the next 5-6 years, and hopefully Federal Realty will get on board as well, that will light up the whole town, and it will be a draw and an attraction and a destination. And I think we can do it. I really believe it. So I hope that answered your question. So I think it's part of that streetscape plan. I will be back next year and we'll ask for a little more money.
You did answer, but you didn't. I was really talking about October 6th, but I heard next year, so that's okay. Any other questions for Ms. Summers?
I'm not coming back on October 6th, if that's the question. This is my ask. This is my ask for the year.
All right. Susan Testa.
Hi, good evening. I'm Susan Testa. I own Romantiques in downtown Los Gatos, and I found out about this chamber idea today, and I think it's amazing. I checked it out, and I think, why not? It's a great idea to light up Los Gatos, and I think we should. I do not think we should postpone until October. We need to do this now. It's going to take time to plan and implement. I also believe you should fund this project 100%. It's an investment, but it's worth it. And I would also like to see, this is just a side note, Elm Street lit up because it is the gateway from downtown to Old Town. And maybe Federal Realty will help out with that. Who knows? I also think, we have to be accommodating. Catherine might come back to you eventually, not on October 6th, for more, ideas and funds. So be open to her ideas because they're amazing. And everybody that participates in these ideas are amazing. And thank you for considering this proposal.
Thank you. We're always open to Catherine's proposals. Any questions for Ms. Testa? Seeing none. Nikki James.
Hello, good evening, Council. My name is Nikki James. I'm the owner of Vagabond Marketing. We currently manage the Experience Los Gatos social media channels, as well as assist where possible for the Chamber with overall marketing strategy consultation. So I just wanted to mention that, the We Got This LG campaign was spearheaded by ourselves in conjunction with the Chamber. And I know we talked about this last time, but it was a very big success. I think we were all pretty surprised at the engagement and excitement that campaign had. In addition to this, just managing this channel and watching it grow drastically as it has. I think we're at almost 2,500 people now following us on Instagram. I've really had a chance to engage and witness the community's thoughts and feelings around everything that's been going on. And we've seen what Los Gatos has done as a town and the amazing efforts regarding community engagement during the pandemic, and everything that you guys have done has been so wonderful. I do believe we've had this focus on providing this safe environment and create this engagement with our local businesses, engage the community members, all of those things. And I've definitely seen it on the channels. So moving into fall and winter and talking with Catherine and everything, I do think there's going to be a very strong need for us to continue to be innovative in what we consider a safe source of entertainment and engagement for the town. Taking into consideration the success that we've had with the We Got This LG campaign, I kind of think, there is a necessity for us to kind of keep walking that walk, so to speak, and prove that we do in fact got this. I think Los Gatos in Lights would provide something very new and unique. It would show a light of hope and sense of community. This outdoor experience would also generate excitement, social media content, engagement, visibility, and ultimately growth, not only to the Experience Los Gatos community, but the town as a whole. Because this would really be a destination for people of all ages. This is a very safe, like Catherine said, it's a very safe on all levels, right? We're not sticking to any one holiday theme or anything. And for me, growing up in Los Gatos and just knowing the success of the lights in the park, something like this really ties in this whole message of lighting up the town and lighting up Los Gatos. And I think this is going to be really needed come winter. People are going to need it, and I think it's going to be really important. So That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. James? I don't see any. Randy Chen.
Hi, good evening, council and staff. My name is Randy Chen and I work at the chamber with Catherine, and she got the sexy part of the presentation and I get the money part. So I'd like to address the cost aspects of this project. We've been researching this for several months and we've done our due diligence in arriving at the decision to go with artistic holiday.
Your child does. Pampers Cruisers 360 pancake.
Well, I will address.
With this Frenchy waistband and adaptive 360 fit. So they can move the
All right, do I get to add minutes on? I will address two issues, the cost comparisons with other vendors and financing options. So as far as cost comparisons, the company we've been working with, Artistic Holiday Designs, fits the bill in more ways than one. Their prices are the most competitive. They have the full range of products we're looking for, and they help with installation. For instance, one of the other companies that has a large 3D star, like the one that was shown, has it at a cost of $13,000 more, or a 58% increase. In addition, no other company carries everything we needed, the streetscapes with the lights, as well as the stationary displays. Most only carried the stationary displays. In addition, this company has the most non-denominational options. Most other companies focus primarily on Christmas-specific displays. And then in front of you, you have the cost comparisons of the three ways we can get these lights. We can buy them outright. We could buy them over the course of 3 years, or we could lease them. Buying the displays outright is the most economic. The cost to rent to buy over 3 years is 10% higher, and the cost of leasing is astronomical. In 2 years, we would have paid close to the purchase price, but we wouldn't own them. So summarizing, we believe we found the right company for the job, and we believe we should purchase the displays. And this option also allows us to build upon it each year, as Catherine said. And just a few answers to some of the other questions. As far as storage, the 3D star and that big arch, yes, they look humongo, and they are when they're set up, but they do break down into much smaller portions, and obviously we can get the size of that. And it would be much better not to wait until October 6th, because we need to, the company has to order these things and get them to us and whatnot. So we should get started on it right away. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Mr. Rennie has a question for you.
Thank you. Just in terms of the buying or leasing, Randy, have you had any discussions with PPW about these specific lights and how robust they are? What is realistically, considering however we might store them, how many years do we really think they're going to last? And after 2 years, you said we would have bought them if we leased them. We might as well bought them if we had leased them. What do we expect the condition of the lights to be in 2 years? So I know that's probably not your expertise, but did you happen to have any discussion with PPW about it?
We did talk to Matt. They are all LED lights. We were more concerned about the energy consumption. I can find out from the company how long they last. Given the cost, I would certainly hope they will last years and years. But I can certainly find out for you. And Matt and I have talked about storage. And again, I can find out exactly how much room they take up as well. I mean, the lights that go across, say, Gray's Lane or the one of those alleys, those are just, they roll up. So I know those don't take up very much room. It's just those big, the star and the archway.
Okay, I just know, when I put lights on my house for Christmas time, it's 2 years and I might as well throw them away as they're starting to break and so forth. And clearly I'm not buying as expensive enough lights, I guess.
Nor are you taking very good care of them. Mine last longer than that. But I can find out for you.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Sayoc had a question, and then the Vice Mayor.
Yes, Randy, could you also confirm, so the 15,000 additional, if we were to use your consultants or contractors to install, does that also include the storage? No?
No, that doesn't include storage. So the items would be shipped to us, and then they would come here and they would install them, and they would come back and they would take them down. But no, it does not include storage. So that is a solution we need to find.
Okay, but the contractor will put them up and take them down.
Yes.
And will your contractor also, if there's any issues that come up during the time span that it's on, will the contractor come out and fix it?
They are located in California, so the company is not, but their contractor is. So I can ask if there are any problems. And as I mean, PPW will be involved for some portion of this because one, they have to, talk with them about where the power sources are in the Civic Center and Town Plaza and things like that. And so whether they will train them a lot, so if there's any little troubleshooting, they can do it. I assume they would. And if, just to clarify, even if PPW wanted to install the lights ourselves, if we decided to go that route, we can hire a technician to come out and train that person, and that is $4,000. I'm pretty sure that's on the budget.
Okay, and if you could, I know in case this information comes back, could you just clarify with the contractor if we were to hire your contractor, if there's any issues during the time span that these are on, is that also part of their service?
Sure, I will do that.
Thanks.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Chen, I was looking at the chart that you put up and I was trying to correlate it with the 150,000. Can you just very generally give me a summary of what you're asking for and where it is on this chart?
So this is just for the actual lights. This is not, there's no installation or anything in this chart. So the Town Plaza, that big huge arch is in Town Plaza. That's $28,000. The big starburst, which would be on Civic Center, is $23,000. All those balls that were in the Terra Patio Alley are $4,000. I mean, I just put the big things on here, and I didn't put some of the little things, but they are on the budget that was in your packet. Pole decor is the lights hanging from the light poles on North Santa Cruz where the banners are now, and then the Grays Lane lights as shown in your packet. Those are the two prices together, so it's about $4,700 for that.
All right, so that first column by outright purchases 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, purchases 6 lighting displays. And then it is anticipated, I think, from what you're saying, that those 6 would go downtown.
They would, and in your packet, the other areas, Grays, Leicester Square and Los Gatos, I think it's called Los Gatos Shopping Center, the Zanardi Shopping Center. There are numbers in there. They just weren't that significant. I just wanted to get the gist of the three options for funding.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Chen? Okay, thank you very much. And the next speaker, I'm going to let you identify yourself. I know who you are, but I don't want to mess up your name. Is Redemption California is what I read.
Hi, sorry, this is David McGregor. I guess I'm signed in on our work account. My apologies for that. So yeah, my name is David McGregor Scholes. Thank you, Mayor and Council members, for tonight. And I'm here as the Chamber of Commerce co-president and also downtown retail store owner. I would like to add my support for Los Gatos Lights project, as it does seem to be the most viable option to try and bring some vibrancy to the town over the colder months in a safe, socially distanced way. I also believe we should have the display run for the longest time possible, because as a retailer, I know the struggle we are currently facing with staffing and managing hours. So if the displays can run for a period of months, it is more likely that retailers will see the increased foot traffic and therefore understand opening later will be a benefit. Currently, I believe most small businesses are operating on restricted hours. So having a beacon, so to speak, that can safely attract potential customers to Los Gatos and not just the downtown, will give them a reason to rethink their opening hours and maybe get more in line with the restaurants. As mentioned earlier, speed definitely is of the essence here. So I think that the earlier we can get working on this, the better. There will also be time needed for word of mouth to build in towns around us and for us to gain exposure. And as mentioned, it can be built upon, because from my understanding, we could be in the same situation next year, 2021. There might not be a real change in what we can do, how we can see each other. So having something that can be brought back that, you know, gives people a sense of, however, you know, short run nostalgia, or something that they can rally around if this continues on through to next year, will be really important, I believe. And like I said, this will continue to change. COVID, you know, it's evolving and the situations are evolving. So we definitely need to keep being flexible and open to ideas on how we can help our businesses. And any ideas should be considered, in my opinion, as long as, you know, they're not too ludicrous. Any way we can help the downtown needs to be looked at in the way I see it. Also, on a personal note, I see these lights as a chance for Los Gatos to show that we welcome all people from every background, race, ethnicity, and gender into our town. So maybe there's a way to celebrate that message alongside the displays as well. Thank you for your time, and we're really looking forward to hopefully making this happen and working with you guys going forward.
Thank you. Any questions for the speaker? Okay, I don't see any, so I'm going to move to the next hand raised is Judy Peterson.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor Jensen and council members. Good evening. Nice to see everybody. I wanted to echo a couple of thoughts. I think that people are really looking for some experiences, and this is certainly going to give some people a very happy holiday experience. There's no parade this year. Let's lift our spirits in one way or another. And I love the carriage rides being decorated, but I can see this as a springboard to other activities to draw people into our downtown shopping area and even some of the outlying areas that have been discussed. You know, we have so many folks in our community that we can reach out to, wonderful singers at the high school and the middle school. I remember 8-10 years ago, Los Gatos Ballet sending performers to do dances in downtown windows. And, you know, people are strolling by and all of a sudden, here's this lovely ballerina doing the Nutcracker. I think there's also an opportunity to involve our service clubs. The Lions Club doesn't have to plan the parade this year, so perhaps we can enlist the Lions Club and other service clubs, Kiwanis and the 2 Rotaries and so forth, to sponsor an event each weekend during this 2 to 3 month run, especially with the concentration during the holiday shopping season. And, you know, another thing I noticed this summer, when you walk by some places, for example, the Palms, sometimes you'll hear music coming out of the speakers, and it really makes you perk up and look and listen and say, gee, that's nice. So we can also create some ambiance around it with some singing, some carolers, some music, even a store window decorating contest, which last time I tried to do that was in 2006, and we didn't get much response, but I have a feeling this year, if we really draw the community together, we can look at our merchants and retailers and say, let's everybody get involved, let's pull together and cheer everybody out, cheer ourselves up, and cheer up our visitors who are obviously, I think, going to be drawn to some of the things that we can offer them besides shopping and eating and so forth. We'll make it a real good, fun family event for everyone. So I wanted to say also, I do understand that, of course, everything is contingent on COVID, but we sure made a great start with the outdoor dining. And I think that really picked up people's spirits. It was really fun to see people coming downtown again. And I think I think more people are coming downtown who perhaps didn't in the past. And this is a chance now to really hold them and say, I want to shop in Los Gatos. I'm not going to the mall this year. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. Any questions for the speaker? See anyone? So next up is Ginger Rowe.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for having me tonight. My name is Ginger Rowe. I'm from Time Out Clothing. I'm also a resident of Los Gatos. And I just want to reiterate a couple things. The consumers really need a reason to keep coming to town because they're getting tired and they're all very depressed and they're wondering what is next. They're asking me all the time, what's going to happen when it gets dark? What's going to happen when it gets cold? What's going to happen when it starts to rain? And what's going to happen because everything's been canceled for the fall? How are you guys going to survive? So they are asking, and we need to have a reason to tell them things are exciting and they're going to continue building on what you guys started. What you did was amazing with all the barriers and the K-rails, and people are happy and they see things happening, but they're really concerned of what's next, what's down the road. So many traditions have been canceled. And like Judy Peterson said, everything, the parade, all those little things that are important to this town are gone. So we need to have a reason to get them excited and to tell them that it's coming. We also need to, the town needs to fund this 100% right now because the chamber is really struggling. Lots of businesses are dropping off and they're losing employees. So they're probably losing membership what would you call it? It's not status, but they're losing their membership amount because they're losing their employees. So they're not paying as much as they normally would. And as far as we don't put it off because we need time to plan. Like Judy Peterson had said, that the stores and the merchants can do their windows and we can all marry around what is going on, but we need time to plan that. And we cannot do it at the last minute. I guarantee you, if you wait till after October and into November to start planning your windows, you're not going to get stuff. It's going to start getting early. It's going to get it's going to get dark early, sooner rather than later. And those lights are going to make a difference in this town because people are out kind of roaming around town, but when it gets dark, they're going to stop and it's going to be deadly for our merchants. And we need a reason to stay open late and we need a reason to rehire more employees because right now we're all struggling. So thank you for your time.
Any questions for Ms. Rowe? Okay, thank you. Maria Risto.
Hi, thank you. Maria Ristow, resident of Los Gatos. I don't want to pile on to what everybody said, but I think this is an amazing idea. As a downtown resident that hasn't missed a single parade since 1987, it's really depressing that we're not going to be able to have the parade this year. And we need a reason to attract people downtown. We need some excitement. We need some light. I mean, right now with the dreary, smoky skies, it feels like we need light right now. There's three things I really like about the Chamber's proposal. One is that in contrast to the Vasona Lights experience, this is intrinsically, constantly, every day a walking experience. We'll have light displays throughout downtown, but we'll also have them across town. And I think it's really important that we expand to all of our shopping areas. So to the extent that other shopping districts like Leicester Square or the Zanardi Center participate, this gives people a reason to walk and explore and see these beautiful light displays. The other thing is in terms of the fact that we will not, disappointingly enough, be able to have the parade this year, it looks like the town will probably be saving money. I know that we probably have a lot of expense going into street closure and police presence. And so this could be an opportunity to take that money and invest it into this light display, which will give people a reason to come into town. And unlike the tree lighting, which is an amazing and fun and wonderful launch to the shopping season, and unlike the Christmas parade, which is an all-day event, this light exhibition could go on for months and give people a reason to come on a regular basis, week in and week out, and give us the vitality and the excitement and just the livelihood that our businesses need and that'll benefit our entire community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ristow. Any questions? Okay, I don't see any. Dustin David.
Hi.
Oh, you got you have a reverb going there.
Sorry, I'm having a little reverb here. You got it? All right, is that working out?
Yeah, it's good, yes.
Okay. I'm Dustin David, and I own Dustin David Salon. I also serve on the Chamber's board as their creative director. And as much as any of those things, I'm a lifetime resident. These many months of COVID have been a devastation on the businesses. I myself, as a salon owner, have only just been able to reopen. I have only 25% of my staff left. I've used my PPP loan, and I can only hope that I can remain open. The Chamber staff has been working tirelessly to stay positive, to come up with safe ways to attract business to town and people. As much as this has been a COVID nightmare, there has been some momentum building, which is amazing. The outdoor seating with the K-rails, that's created this sort of magical buzz that Los Gatos has been missing. People are coming to town again, and the locals are supporting this outdoor environment. And after so many meetings, so many discussions, we've come up with this brilliant idea to encourage this building of excitement with a people feel for downtown. And as the days get shorter in the winter and the air gets cooler, we want to light up Los Gatos. We visualize a spectacular light installation to illuminate spirits. Because enough with this COVID darkness. These installations will further solidify our place on the map, reinforcing our destination status, thus encouraging people and businesses to invest their time, their money, and their love for this great town that we all love. So we need to act now and light it up. Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Mr. David. Are there any questions? I don't see any.
Nothing, I've got answers.
I'm sure you do. All right, I do not see any other hands raised for this item. I just saw one more. Julie McAuliffe. Ms. McAuliffe, do you want to speak? If so, unmute yourself and go ahead.
Sorry, Council. Just wanted dittos what Dustin just said, lighting up this town. I actually live near the Shannon area, near the Leicester Square, which would be lovely if that was lit up, but it's actually right down the road from Pasona Park, which is already lit up. So I think it's a wonderful idea to light up Los Gatos. Definitely the silver lining in the COVID is people going downtown. The interactive art is just a spectacular idea. And I definitely think with the Chambers growing with this idea every year will only enhance Los Gatos. So I'm a proud resident and supporting Los Gatos as much as I can. So I think it's something we should move forward tonight. And so it does take time to plan all this, as Pasona is probably already planning and putting up the lights. So we need to get going, and thank you for having me this evening.
Thank you. Any questions for the speaker? Yeah, I don't see any, and again, I don't see any other hands raised. Give it a sec. Okay, no further hands raised, so I'm going to close the public portion of the hearing.
Mayor, there is one more.
There is one more. I don't see it.
Looks like she lowered it again. Sorry.
Okay. So the public hearing is closed. Council, do you have any questions for staff regarding this matter? Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor, as I find the unmute button. So leading up to my question, my thoughts are that we should be funding it in full. We can't ask the Chamber to come up with money because we know they really don't have money. But I also feel that, we've got reduced revenue coming in also, so we should be careful about how we spend also. Just because we have something in a fund doesn't mean we should go empty the fund. So I like the idea of using PPW, and I would say borrow some time from other maintenance, but actually we're going to end up stealing time from other maintenance to try to keep the costs down a little bit. So with that in mind, my questions are about the spreadsheet that's in our packet that's part of the presentation. Now, I'm assuming that's all coming from the chamber. And there's been some comments in different places from staff that leads me to believe this is not exactly accurate. So first of all, when I look at it, it looks like they've assigned money for staff in here, but it's not actually extra money because it would be it's not above budget money. And so trying to figure this out, it looks like there's what, 114,000 that would really be additional budget spending, since part of what's written down in there is, for now, assume the hours they have. What's written down in there, some of that money is staff time, which is not additional budget costs.
Let me try and answer your question, and then Director Morley may want to jump in. As you can see on the slide in the presentation, page 58 of your packet, and the last slide of attachment 1, they assumed 80 hours of PPW hours to do the installation at a cost of $97 per hour. So that was the estimate. And then they're also assuming the on-site technician and then an electrician for the light poles. So there's not just PPW costs, but also other costs involved. And in the desk item, Matt mentioned that given the definition that still needs to occur in terms of the project, how many light strings, some of those details, we still don't know how many staff hours it will take to estimate. And in the desk item, Director Morley mentioned perhaps 200 hours, which is a different order of magnitude. But let me turn it over to Director Morley, who might have a better sense as to what this type of project might actually entail. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurel. Matt Morley, Director of Parks and Public Works. So there are a lot of unknowns and still things that we need to work through. So from my perspective, if we're going to deliver the project, the sooner that we are given the go-ahead, the better, so that we can begin that work and identify what the costs are going to be and how we're going to deliver it. We do think there's probably more hours than the 80 that the chamber was contemplating, which is reasonable and understandable. It's hard to know what the scope of the work is. We don't know if the big light displays are something where you open the box and they pop out and they're ready to go, or if there's some assembly required, or what that looks like. So still some things to work through to get there. In terms of the dollars and the PPW dollars allocated, I think you're right. They're largely going to be absorbed in our budget, and Councilmember Rennie we will likely not do some things as a result. But those are decisions that we make all the time, so certainly something that we can work with. The only circumstance that I could see that would not be the case is if we have something that comes up where we need to get the work done, in which case we'd have to hire a contractor to sort of fill that gap for us, probably on the sort of day-to-day work or the emergency work side. And once we get our hands onto this project, I think we'd want to see it through. So I did talk to my staff. They do enjoy the work they've been doing in the downtown to support the downtown and all of Los Gatos through these times, and are excited about the opportunity to continue that support, whether it be with this project or others. So it's a positive thing from that perspective. Obviously, the decision on whether this is the appropriate use of the funds for the town is that for the council to make.
And Mr. Rennie, go ahead. Yes.
So Ms. Pravetti, you said in the beginning you're looking for us to possibly give you a maximum hours or maximum dollar kind of direction. But where I'm struggling with is, since it's kind of unknown, if we said, okay, PPW can spend 120 hours and not more than 120,000, but what if the project's not done? That doesn't make any sense to me. So how do I give you that, how do I make a motion with the right, it seems like I could constrain one, but I can't constrain the other kind of thing. Any thoughts?
Yeah, that's a great point. The council could say, as you were starting to say, the council should perhaps fund the full 150, including PPW as the installer. And then you could ask us to report back in terms of what those costs might be, particularly for storage. Utility costs are going to be an interesting conversation. Some of those utility costs will be borne by the town. And as you know, we spread utility costs to certain tenants. So we'll want to make sure that any lighting on the lawn does not go to some of our tenants, that the town absorbs all of that. So we've got a little bit of homework ahead to really understand what that's going to be. If the utility costs are going to be borne by the private property, I would assume they're going to want to know what that cost is before they agree to having either PPW or a private installation happen over and attached to their utility lines. So there are some things that we just don't know right yet. But I think if the council is so inclined and says, this is a great idea, let's give it $150,000, work within that budget as best you can, and report back in, say, late October with what we've learned as we start diving into the details, working with property owners, working with the chamber, working with the vendor, then we can come back and say, yes, we're still within that budget, or no, in fact, we have some unforeseen costs that we didn't know about. So I think we just really need a starting point. But I think we just also want to be aware that this might be a lot more than 150. And I appreciate that the chamber thinks this is a conservative estimate, but just having some experience with projects, there's always the unforeseen. And that's why you often see contingencies built into our capital projects.
Okay, thank you. Mayor, that's all for the moment. Thank you.
Before I call on Councilwoman Sack and the Vice Mayor, I have sort of a follow-up to that question. So I'm going to just do it now. I'm curious whether there's an estimate of, is it more cost effective to just go with a contractor for installation, given the obligations that our PPW and other staff members have, or at least the initial outing, if the council goes forward with this? Does that make more economic sense than to try to figure out budgeting to have our staff do it, given that they'd have to learn how, et cetera, et cetera?
Turn to Director Morley.
Thank you. Yeah. So something that we actually talked about, and whether we would prefer that a contractor do it. I think that the missing element there is that if it's town money, then it's most likely a prevailing wage project, which adds some complexities to it, including whether the contractor is set up to do prevailing wage projects, and what the costs are associated with that typically increases the cost of the project. So that just goes into the unknown category of things that we still need to work through. And certainly we'd want to bring you the most logical long-term proposal. So if it means that we do it this year, it takes us a little bit longer, but next year we know how it works and we can save us some money long-term, that may be the smartest thing to do. But we just don't know until we know what the lights look like, what the equipment looks like.
Okay, thank you. So I'll go to Councilwoman Sack.
Actually, I had a similar question for Director Morley, and I appreciate the answer that you gave for our desk item. Coming into the meeting, I was inclined to work with the option where we fully fund it and ask that we utilize the chamber's contractor, just because I feel like you and your staff have been working nonstop, and so the last thing I wanted to do was add more. But listening to the conversation, it sounds like PPW is going to be involved to some extent, whether it's actually you and your staff putting up the lights or someone else. So I guess what I'm asking you is what's easier for you and your staff? If I'm ready to pay the money for someone else to do it, or is it just easier for your staff to do it because then you know what to do and you have a certain standard that you would be, so that's the question.
I appreciate the question and the acknowledgement of the work that the team's doing. So I think it's still out there for us to answer. And so and I don't know that you need to make that decision tonight. I think if you're comfortable with a project and you want the project to go forward, then and you think that $150,000 is reasonable as the town manager highlighted, I think that's a fair approach to take. And then we'll bring you back an update, probably in multiple forms through the manager's weekly update, and then also through a return to the council to say, here's where we're at and what the project is going to look like, so that you know along the way what direction we're going to take. And that'll allow us to see what we can do with contractors versus what we can do with our in-house staff. And what makes the most sense and actually implement it from that perspective. The challenge for us is if we're going to make this happen, and we're thinking that Thanksgiving is the time that we want lights to be on, we need to be moving on this quickly to make it happen. There's lead time on products, there's lead time on getting contracts in place if we need to use contractors, that kind of a thing. So there's a lot of work to do on the front end before you see any lights go up in the air.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So in listening to what everybody's saying, for the most part, it's consistent. There's some divergence when you get to the work and how much it's going to cost. Some of the things that are consistent is that, first of all, using those pictures as exemplars, it's a beautiful, beautiful presentation. So that's really cool. My preference would be that it wouldn't just be downtown, but that we would have some lighting throughout the town in other retail areas, so we help all the merchants. I don't know if there's money for that, but that would be my druthers. But so with all of that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we move forward with this project, that we budget $150,000 from the downtown account. And I don't know if staff or the mayor needs anything more from the motion.
Not for my purposes, Ms. Pravetti. Okay. All right, we have a motion on the table, Mr. Rennie.
I will second the motion. I think it's important for us to help our business community get past COVID. If we end up past COVID and half our town is empty, we will have lost the synergy and it'll be much harder to refill it. So to me, this is, a small investment to, make it much easier for our town to recover at the back end of this COVID. So I definitely agree with moving forward with this. I like this idea of, get people to shop Los Gatos, not the mall. I think that this coming season, there is going to be less brick and mortar shopping, and Los Gatos needs to do something to have kind of that there shopping experience to get people in. We do have to compete with a lot of other places, and in today's retail world, we need to be competitive, and I think this is going to help us, again, like I say, create that there that'll get people excited. So I'm seconding the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Rennie. Any other comments on the motion, Ms. Sayoc?
I'm also supporting it, and I'm excited about the project. I think we all need some sparkle in our life right now. The only thing I ask, I'm intrigued by the conversation we'll be having on October 6th. And so with as much detail as staff may have at that time, if you could just help fold this effort with all other efforts that will be coming forward, so that we have an idea of how everything will be intertwined. And I'm going to concur with Vice Mayor Spector's comments that let's look at the town holistically and see how we can add some cohesion and sparkle throughout town.
Thank you. Before I call the question, I'm assuming, Ms. Pravetti, that the details or the questions that we've raised tonight with budgeting and installation, maintenance, fixing it if it gets broken, etc., are things that, to the extent possible, are going to get brought back to us on October 6th. Is that correct?
We'll try. I don't know if we'll be ready on October 6th with all of those answers. If we can, we certainly will bring those to you as soon as possible. I think we might have to dive in a little bit more and really work with the vendor to understand better. So it may not, as Matt mentioned, we might be able to do an update and then really have a more in-depth conversation about the contractor versus PPW staff, perhaps at the second meeting in October.
So update is fine.
Okay.
Thank you. So that's why I couched it with to the extent possible. If there are no further comments, I'm going to call the question. Vice Mayor Spector?
Yes.
Councilwoman Sayoc?
Yes.
Councilman Rennie?
Yes.
And the mayor votes yes, it passes unanimously. Thank you to all who came forward with the idea, and thank you to the speakers and those who contributed their opinion to this matter. With that, we're going to move on to agenda item number 6, which is a discussion of our police department budget, direction for potential reforms, training, etc. As I mentioned earlier, all council members were present at the meeting we had on September 8th. And the things that are in this staff report are generally coming out of that meeting and the other communications that we've received, of course, beforehand and continuing. So I think that, I don't want to preempt, I think Ms. Pavetti is going to present, but really, I think what we're looking for with this discussion is direction or specific indication that the council would like to move forward with one item or another and perhaps knock out others so that the town can come back to us with better and more detailed information about what that would mean. So given that, I'm going to turn that over to Ms. Pavetti.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you to the full council for attending the workshop last week. We were very pleased with the attendance, really grateful for all the wonderful questions that were raised. And many thanks to our Chief of Police for answering those questions in real time. One of the attachments to your report is a summary of all of the questions and all of the answers. So we took a record of what all those comments were. I want to acknowledge and recognize our clerk department for putting that together so quickly, so that way it could be made public for this particular meeting. And then we're also working to make it into a frequently asked questions, so that way other members of the community who might be interested in our police practices can use that as a reference for the questions raised. Back on June 16th, Councilmember Rennie asked us to bring back a high-level review of the police department budget. And so really we spent the summer talking and thinking about how do we engage the community around issues of racism that have been raised to the town's attention by individual communications to council members, to town staff, and really think about how do we address this issue in a way that's going to be constructive and give the council an opportunity to actually consider actionable items that the town can implement, perhaps in partnership with our other agencies and with other nonprofit entities that we work so closely with. So the first part of your staff memorandum gives that high-level budget overview. I just want to remind the council that every year when we do our strategic priorities, we reinforce what our core goals are. And among them are public safety, quality public infrastructure, community character, fiscal stability, and good governance. And so when we build our budget and council considers it and adopts it, there's a reason why the distribution of the funds fall to the police department and fall to our Parks and Public Works department. It's because those are the departments that deliver on those core goals that I mentioned. In the report, for comparison purposes, we also wanted to be transparent about how much of our property tax goes to the county fire district. We were annexed into that district in 1970, and they get a straight percentage of our property tax that was determined at the time of the annexation. And for fiscal year 1920, that amount of money was 18.7 million, which was even bigger than what the town has budgeted for its police department for 2021, and certainly much larger than the 16.9 million that we budgeted for 1920. So the town invests a significant amount in public safety overall. We are a service organization, as you know. Our staff love working for the town. They love working with our community. And so in order to do that, we have to get the best talent that's out there to do the work. And so salaries and benefits are a big portion of our budget, and it's a big portion of every department's budget. The police department, it's a little bit of a higher percentage as noted in the staff report, but it is consistent that the people delivering the service need to be paid, and that is how service gets delivered. It's with our people. So essentially, you know, about 85% of the police budget is for salaries and budget and benefits. Within the police department, we have a lot of different programs. We have patrol, we have investigations, we have dispatch. As Chief DeSena mentioned at the workshop, all of these services work together. We can't just pull one segment out and say run without doing a records operation or run without having dispatch. They all work together as a single team. Patrol is the biggest proportion of that, but investigations is right after. And I have to say that as a resident of Los Gatos, we should all be proud that we have police personnel who actually investigate the crimes that happen in our town. And we know that other cities very close to us don't have the resources to do investigations. They'll take a report, but then they won't do the investigation. So we follow through, we try and solve as many crimes as we can, and then we really deliver. So there's more detail, and we've got, you know, the chief and our finance director and others here on the Zoom meeting. So if council wants to drill down a little bit more, you'll see that like many of our departments, it's a lean operation. We basically staff with 3 patrol officers per shift. Most of our shifts are 12-hour shifts. So we're asking a lot of our officers, even in a status quo. So I know there's interest in perhaps diverting funds, but I think we have to really ask the harder questions of what are the council's priorities for public safety. We got a lot of great comments, as I said, at the workshop. It was just wonderful. And we focused the workshop around 3 potential reforms just to test the water. These were ideas that had come forward at council meetings through verbal communications or general plan update, advisory committee meetings through verbal communications, ideas of citizen oversight, a second idea of diverting funds from the police department to pay for social workers to address the mental health and homeless calls that we receive. And then the third idea was perhaps to disband and end our partnership with our school districts and no longer offer a school resource officer. So we tested those ideas. We didn't do any polling, but I'd say informally, there wasn't much comment on the student resource officer. There was definitely interest in oversight and definitely interest in how we can better serve our mentally health challenged individuals and how we can really make sure that they've got the services that we want. Other themes really revolved around transparency. You know, how can we make data more available around arrests and citations? How can we make racial data more available and accessible? And as the chief mentioned, you know, we just purchased a very large new computer-assisted dispatch system that will allow us to track those kinds of questions that people have. So we don't have all the statistics that our public is interested in, but we are committed to that once we have those systems up and running, we will be publishing the data at least on an annual basis. The slides that the chief presented are attached as attachment 1 to your report. So you have some of those statistics before you tonight. The other theme that came through in addition to transparency was increased accountability. How can we make sure our officers are accountable to the mission and values of compassion and caring for our Los Gatos community? So there was a lot of interest in how we can make sure we are really doing that. And then really, looking at the true meaning of community policing and how do we get our police officers out of their cars? What would it take to get them to walk at least a portion of their shift, in the neighborhoods, on our streets, et cetera. So folks were really interested in making sure that we're true to our word and that we're really walking the walk, so to speak. So in the memo before you, we essentially identified a series of next steps for you to consider. And I know I appreciate your patience with this approach because it's not as simple as, oh, divert 20,000 from this program and hire a social worker and boom, we can check the box, we've solved the issue. It's a lot more complicated than that. And as we think about these issues, there's more analysis that really needs to happen. And I'm sure each of you probably have questions about additional data that each of you would love to see. So, but before we can do that analysis, I really need to get your direction about which elements you would like to pursue. So I'm going to go through, if I may, Mayor, the different ideas that are in the report. One is to determine an appropriate police oversight model for Los Gatos.
And just as to council, I'm sorry, Ms. Privetti, you'll find this on page 6 of the staff report.
Right, that's 6 of the staff report or page 67 of the packet if you're on your iPad. So at the bottom of the page, Judge Ladoris Cordell was a wonderful facilitator for us last week. And she has a lot of experience with oversight. And we asked her if she would be interested in doing a short-term consulting engagement with us. And she is very interested. In fact, she's already brainstorming and sharing some of her ideas with us. So if council is interested, we would enter into a new contract with Judge Cordell and really identify and cost out some different models. The bottom line is really for all complaints, whether they're within the department or coming from the public, that all complaints should really be investigated by an external source and not by the police staff themselves. So if that's an area of interest, we're happy to pursue it. On the next page, there's a lot of talk and interest about what are the different options for providing social services for our mental health and or homeless calls. And there is a desk item. We had a lot of questions from a single council member kind of diving in a little bit more about what are our existing partnerships, what are those opportunities. And so you've got some of those responses in your desk item, but there's really a lot more work to be done in this area. As you know, the mental health and the homeless situation is much bigger than Los Gatos. And we would need to really understand how we fit into that system and also where the gaps are. Because quite frankly, there are huge gaps institutionally throughout the state of California, throughout our nation. And so we would have to be very strategic about how we use our town resources to try and provide those services. And maybe that's with a partner or several partners in the nonprofit sector. Maybe it's strengthening our relationship with the county, or maybe it's hiring our own staff who could be accountable to us with those calls. But again, there's a little bit more work to really explore those options more. The third option is to utilize non-sworn personnel for non-emergency calls and determine whether or not that would save us personnel costs. So for example, we do have in our budget a community service officer. I believe it's currently vacant. So we could make sure that that person is providing calls, responding to calls, the non-emergency ones and the ones that we anticipate would not escalate to need an officer. When we had our nighttime code enforcement officer, she was trained as a CSO. And so she was doing some of those non-emergency calls when she was here. We've now filled that position, but with COVID, we've kind of reduced our service in the nighttime area for code compliance. But if council's interested in exploring that, we can, talk through some different options for utilizing existing personnel, either in community development or in the police department. The fourth is how could we increase our foot patrols? You know, our community seems very pleased with the service that we provide, but I think a lot of them are missing kind of the former Scott Seaman, Chief Seaman's approach of greeting and really being available on the street. So what would it take to give our officers that opportunity to engage with all community members? And then finally, we of course want to continue to be a pioneer and really continue to implement the best practices in police work here in Los Gatos. We've come a long way. The chief has been very open to new ideas. In fact, when Judge Cordell mentioned Dr. Jennifer Eberhardt as being an expert on bias, his staff immediately is working to see whether or not she's available to do inherent bias training for all of our officers as immediate follow-up. So we remain very open to ideas. This is a long-term issue. You know, I don't think we're gonna find some little quick fixes, but I think this is the beginning of the conversation, and we look forward to your direction as well as the public comment tonight in terms of how you would like us to proceed, which of these ideas are higher priority than others, and we welcome your comments. Thank you very much.
Ms. Pravetti, thank you very much. Council, I'm going to suggest that we hold our questions and comments because I expect our discussion to be somewhat lengthy until we hear from members of the public. So unless I get a real objection to that, I'm going to look to members of the public to please raise your hand so that we can get your comments before we begin our discussion. So right now I see one hand up, and that's Terry Duryea. Mr. Duryea.
I think I just unmuted.
Yes, we hear you.
Hello, Honorable Mayor and council members. First, I want to thank council and staff for holding the September 8th workshop. I endorse Ms. Pravetti's comments about the workshop. In particular, I was impressed with the chief's openness to new ideas. I began by offering thoughts on 2 of the 3 police reforms Ms. Pravetti asked us to address at the workshop. I believe we have an opportunity to use budgeted but currently unspent police department dollars to hire professional social workers as first responders to certain types of nonviolent crime, including mental health issues and homelessness. And I'll come back and speak to that in a second. I do support the idea of some form of police oversight to improve accountability. Personally, I've had both good and poor experiences in dealing with our police officers. My good experiences were fostered by an attitude that the officers shown of mutual respect and mutual interest. My poor experiences were fostered by officers who displayed arrogance and authority. Here are 2 observations that I take out of the workshop. I was surprised to see that mental health incidences are almost as frequent as crimes against persons. And recognizing that, because only 32 of the budgeted 39 sworn officer positions are filled, Los Gatos has unspent budgeted dollars to provide improved services for people with mental health issues. This gives the town flexibility to allocate police department resources to meet the existing community needs in a more empathetic, community-friendly, and potentially cost-effective way. I'll close with 3 additional points. I would like to see police uniforms look less militaristic. It impacts the public's perception of the police, and in some cases, it may impact the sworn officer's mindset and actions. I was living at Berkeley when they were having the student unrest in the 60s, and when the Berkeley Police Department shifted their uniform to a much less militaristic one, it definitely changed the entire relationship between the police department and the student activists, many of whom came from outside the university. I would suggest that the town have all sworn officers go through implicit bias training. More importantly, testing as part of the anti-racism training. And it's not just to focus on how not to operate in a non-racist way. Lastly, I'd suggest the town determine if the contract for police services with Montesrino covers the full burden cost of providing those services. and if not, develop a plan to recover them.
Thank you, Mr. Duryea. Any questions? I don't see any questions, so I'm going to move to the next speaker, David McGregor-Scholes.
Thank you again, Council. I'm actually just commenting on this personally, not as a representative of the Chamber, but I'm commenting as a retail store owner in downtown. Just as a general, I definitely feel supportive of the idea of having a mental health expert be a first response option for dealing with the homeless or anyone that is not actually committing a crime downtown or in the town. Even just today, there was a situation where we were told by other store owners of a young man who obviously was influenced by drugs. We thought he might have been homeless, and it was texted around to other business owners that he had been in a store and the police had been notified. And honestly, my kind of heart sunk a little bit when hearing that that was going to be his first experience, was going to be with officers, armed officers going down there, when it would be, I feel like, a much better situation and just be a lot less potentially aggravating if he was a specialist health officer or someone that could go in and deal with him. And as a store owner, I'd much rather see someone dealt with peacefully and calmly than likely to possibly be aggravated by armed officers approaching them. So definitely in favor of community outreach options or other options than armed officers dealing with the homeless or mentally ill. I think that's a really important step moving forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions for the speaker? I don't see any. I don't have no other hands raised. There we go. Jeff Suzuki.
Hi. I just wanted to add a little bit to what everybody else was saying about mental health and how mental health incidents are as common as other incidences, crimes, etc. Which is that we can also view the treatment of mental health as being a highly economical way, a means of essentially preventing crime in Los Gatos. And there are many different studies to back this up. Like, for instance, Lyndon A. Teplin and et al. Found that people with severe mental illnesses are 4 times more likely to commit crimes, which means that we have that preventative element, but also people are 11 times more likely to be a victim of crime, which means that if we essentially take care of the mental health issue in Los Gatos, we are likely to see a spillover effect in the commitment of crime and also the people being the victims of crime. Additionally, according to a study by the Association of Policy Analysis and Management, it shows that investing in mental health services is a highly effective means of reducing youth recidivism. If we basically take care of mental health in our schools, and as we know, that is becoming an increasingly pressing topic as time goes by. Mental health is intensifying as times go on, especially with the isolating and alienating effects with COVID. I believe that we should have, as everybody else has said, the first response to mental health problems and also health issues as well, like welfare checks, go to health professionals as a first layer of defense. I think that would be not only moral, not only would it maximize the welfare of our people, but it would also be a highly cost-effective solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Suzuki. Any questions for the speaker? I don't see any. And once again, I don't see any hands raised. I'll give it a second, and then I'm just going to close the public hearing and look to the council for discussion. Okay, seeing no one, I am going to close the public hearing. Council, the way I'm going to suggest that we go about this, unless you have a specific question that you need answered first, and maybe we'll do that, is to just actually call on each council member, have you identify those items that you're interested in, and then perhaps go to a more in-depth discussion about that particular item that rises up, and then follow that with a motion. But if you have a particular question that you need to answer before we move to discussion, let's do that. Vice Mayor, I saw your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple questions, and this goes to the foundational information before we move forward, at least for me. If changes were to occur, there's a lot of people who have given input on police oversight or citizen oversight. If that kind of thing were to occur, would it be anticipated that that would be paid for out of the police budget, or would it be an additor to the current budget? What is the concept at this point in time?
Thank you for the question. I think the concept could take many forms. I think the idea is that we would want to create an independent opportunity for people to report their complaints. So just in brainstorming yesterday with a couple of our staff and the judge, we were brainstorming that what if we allowed complaints, instead of going to the police department, they would come directly to the clerk's office. So we would have a neutral party that's used to taking in appeals and other types of information. And then we would hire the outside investigator to do the work. So it would be additive. We would need to, have a budget to hire outside investigators. We do some amount of outside investigation now, depending upon the severity of a particular complaint and the people involved. So we have been able to absorb it in our budget. But if we were to really promote this as an independent opportunity, we would want to make sure that there was funding available to actually follow through with the independent evaluation.
All right, thank you. Second question. We have some very robust volunteer groups in Los Gatos, CERT, Volunteers in Policing, DART. Are you able to tell me how many hours those organizations contribute to the town on whatever basis, annual or however you may have it?
Let me turn to our chief to see if he has that level of detail.
Good evening, Vice Mayor. Thank you for the question. I'm afraid you stumped me on that one. I don't know. We actually have 206 volunteers. The vast majority are CERT members, about 150 or 160. We also have DART. So I wasn't prepared to answer the amount of hours. For those two organizations, it's considerable. We also have VIPs that help us with sort of mundane tasks around the department. And then we're restructuring our victim support unit, which will be it's being restructured to more of a victim or family advocate. But again, we're in the process of restructuring. We only actually have 3 volunteers that have been certified so far. So I apologize, I don't have an answer.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. Is staff able to put up the slide from our workshop titled Arrest Citation Data? I'd like to ask, make a comment, ask question on that. And maybe while you're working on that, I would ask another question of the chief to describe for me our victim services units a little bit more. Yeah, okay, his slide's up, so let me start with that. So when I look at this slide, the reason I look at this is, I would be embarrassed if we have, too much bias. I know inherent bias is hard to get rid of. So I look at this data carefully and it's important to me that it doesn't show a bias. And the thing that I note in this, if you look at our total population, let's look at white. It says there's 72% of Los Gatos population is white. And if you look at the rest of the residents, arrests of residents, it's 73 and citations is 72. So it says, it matches almost exactly with our makeup of our town. The problem I have on this, when we start looking at total arrests, now all of a sudden white is only 57% and Hispanic jumps a lot. So for me, I need to compare apples and apples. The first comparison is an apple to apple, population in Los Gatos to arrest of citizens. Now we're talking about total arrests and what is the percentage. But this table doesn't show me the right thing to compare it to. So total arrests is now all the arrests of citizens and people that come into Los Gatos. but what is, if we now, I'm assuming Los Gatos is probably more white than the average of our county. If we look at the total number of the county, what is the ethnic, we use the term race, what's the racial makeup of the county, to and maybe it needs to be normalized or something, but I don't have a column to compare the total arrests to. Hopefully you're understanding where I'm going on this. And do we have better information to be able to compare that column to versus to our total population?
Thank you, Councilmember Rennie. First off, I wanted to restate that this information here is very incomplete. So it is only, we are in the process of transitioning to the new CAD RMS system that Town Manager Betty referred to. And so currently with our current system, we are not able to collect all stop data. So what we did, we went back 2 years and went through all of our arrests and citations. So stop data, when we will start collecting it for the RIPA Act of 2015, will include all stops of all people. So this is not a complete picture. Again, it is a little problematic to compare strict census data to stop data. So again, but to answer your question, I don't have information that will compare, say, the county in terms of total population, broken down by ethnic group and total arrests. I think we compare roughly with other jurisdictions similar to ours, but again, I don't have an actual comparison by according to the county. And I don't know that that would be reflective of the level of bias in our officers, again, especially with the incomplete information.
And Mayor, if I may, just quickly doing a Google search, the county is 52% white, Black or African American is 2.8% in the county of Santa Clara. American Indian or Alaska Native alone is 1.2%. Asian alone is 39%. Hispanic or Latino, 25%. So that gives you a rough sense. And there's reasons why we have a historically low Black population in the county as a whole that we can get into if you wish.
Okay, thank you. So, basically, if we see this kind of data again, hopefully, as the chief said, we have better, more complete data, and we have better apples to apples kinds of comparison. So let me go to my second question. I'd like to understand better our victim services unit. I understand it's a volunteer unit. How much, my questions are kind of around, how much do our officers spend time as part of that? And are any of the volunteers certified in any way in mental health? Could you describe it better for me? And how large a program is it, and so forth?
So the program, the VSU or Victim Services Unit, was actually initiated in 2011, I believe, under Chief Seaman. It's actually an award-winning. It's won some awards through the International Association of Chiefs of Police. Now, originally, the idea was to contact every single victim of crime in the town of Los Gatos. So that encompassed any crime. So if your car got broken into, all the way up to, I think they were involved in the Kumar homicide, that kind of stuff. So they would reach out and provide services. Typically, the volume was pretty great. So typically it was like a letter or a packet that was sent to them for lower level crimes, but they would actually respond out to crimes, violent crimes, et cetera, et cetera. So in ensuing years, the program just kind of fell into hiatus a little bit. They really stopped just because of the volume of work. They stopped sending out packets to every victim of crime. So it was under, and there was typically there was a sergeant that oversaw the unit. So the time spent in terms of staff time was just overseeing it. So in the last couple of years, I asked Captain D'Antonio and Sergeant Field to take a look at it again to see if we can revitalize it. So they've been in the process of, they're working with Kathy Williams, is one of the original members of the Victim Services Unit, and she has served as an advocate for families in some of our violent crimes. So I think the idea is that it really is more to focus on traumatic events that impact the community members here in Los Gatos and in Montecito. So that would be, suicides, violent crime, et cetera, et cetera. And the idea would be that they would go out to the scene if officers call them out there and or provide whatever service they need. If they're bringing in folks to be interviewed, they could be there to support victims of crime. So we're still in the process of evolving what exactly. I know that they've got some training lined up. We have 3. It was actually like a recruitment on, and we're vetting out the people who are volunteering to do that. And there is some training involved, but we haven't fully fleshed out what the level of it is going to be.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I think that's all of my sort of non-related to your program questions.
Not necessarily my program, it's just a suggestion how we could go forward. Any other, what I'm going to call base level questions, Councilwoman Sayoc?
Thank you, Mayor. Chief Jacinda, there was a question that Mr. Duryea had asked based on your slides, and it was actually 2 of the questions I had of you. If you could just elaborate, because I thought the answers I think the answers are relevant. The first is the definition of 32 operational that you had on your slide versus the 39 that we actually have budgeted. What surprised me was those are the deficit of 7 are actually people are assigned to those. And so they're not vacancies. Is that correct?
That is correct, Councilmember Sayoc. Again, as I explained to you, the reason I became a cop is I'm not good at math or statistics. So in fact, we are actually very close to having our 39 authorized. So we're authorized 39 sworn personnel, of which at the time we had 32 that I was calling operational. So again, those are officers that are street ready, actually working on the street. So of those 7 that were not part of that, we have 2 vacancies, although we actually have a final job offer for a lateral officer that will be starting, I believe, on Monday. So technically 1 vacancy. We have 2 recruit officers that are in the field training program. So we don't consider them to be street ready simply because they're riding with the training officer and they've been through the academy, but they're learning the job of being a police officer on the street. We also have 2 officers that are on sort of long-term leave for job incurred injuries. And then we have 1 officer who's been on long-term military leave, but we're thankfully he'll be returning hopefully within the month. So that those are those 7. So technically we only have 1 vacancy, but we're also backgrounding another officer for that final vacancy. So with luck, we should be up to full staffing soon, we hope.
Thank you. And one of the other question I had asked that I think is worthwhile to answer publicly today, implicit bias training. In your presentation, you had said that was encouraged of all officers, but today you did tell me that was actually required and that all your officers are going through this training.
Correct. The state law mandates that officers go through racial profiling / cultural diversity training once every 5 years. This is the California Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training. So we do incorporate that. However, just prior to my arrival, I believe in 2017, they actually had a professor, I think Sandra Brown was her name, that came so every year the officers go through advanced officer training, or AOT. So it's perishable skills, things that are required by post. So as part of that AOT, before I arrived, they actually had this, a speaker came in and gave a presentation on that racial profiling, I'm sorry, implicit bias. Last year, as part of AOT, we did have a panel discussion with members of the Muslim, the Sikh, and the Jewish faith. And again, we were looking to do implicit bias training, and by good fortune, Judge Cordell mentioned this Dr. Everhart out of Stanford that I'd heard of, and she's supposed to do an excellent job on implicit bias. Has worked with a lot of police departments, so we are working to get her scheduled to present another advanced officer training on implicit bias for all officers. And then other officers have attended other classes on their own, not all of them, but classes on fair and impartial policing, on implicit bias, on other kinds of things. along those lines.
Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. All right, so I have a fundamental question that kind of goes to my consideration of social mental health positions for non-sworn officers. I know that the SRO, school resource officer, didn't really jump to the forefront of our discussion this past week, but I'm curious, Chief, can you tell me what policing does that person do, as opposed to, I would say, perhaps counseling or social work? Or, for example, you mentioned that the person put together a vaping class. So to me, that's not traditional policing. So I'm curious, is that really a police position that we're sort of stationing exclusively through the schools, or is that something else? And is that something that could be perhaps substituted for a social worker or a mental health worker, or perhaps partnering with the school so that it becomes more of a traditional guidance counselor type position? I'm just curious how that works with our policing.
Thank you, Mayor. So in fact, it is a partnership as we speak. I mean, the Los Gatos Saratoga Union High School District pays for 36% of Officer Stanley's salary, and then the Los Gatos Union School District pays for 14%. So we're only paying 50% for Officer Stanley. He does. I mean, let's set aside the, I'm hoping the infinitesimally small possibility of an active shooter. The idea of having a police officer on campus, especially for us, we don't have a lot of gang issues. We don't have a lot of crime in our schools, thankfully. But I think there's an element of getting an officer to interact with our students in a really sort of non-confrontational sort of way. There are criminal acts that arise that he does deal with, but again, it is not. It's not the bulk of what he does. He does do the important thing, and I think the area where school resource officers have gotten into trouble across the country is they start getting involved in disciplinary issues. It becomes a hammer for the school administration to discipline students, which is inappropriate. And although Officer Stanley will offer advice in certain situations, by and large, his function is to serve in that criminal capacity. He does work with, again, the vaping awareness. There was a big problem with vaping there. So as I mentioned, he helped with the awareness program and with the vaping diversion program. I think the big thing that we've been focusing on is that behavioral intervention team. Again, behavioral intervention teams initially were started to look at potential threats on campus, but they really evolved, I think. And again, when I was at San Jose State, we had one there, and the focus was that potential threat, the potential active shooter. But the reality is, most of the cases we started dealing with were students in some kind of crisis, typically some kind of mental health crisis. So it's a multifunctional meeting, and that's what it has to be. It has to be members of the school staff, the school resource officer, counseling. It's got to be teams getting together on a regular basis to look at these cases, and then to continue to have a caseworker to help with these students. So we did fund the attendance of a class down in Southern California, and Officer Stanley went down. I believe Captain Tata went, and then we had Keith Rocha, who's with the district, as well as one of the assistant principals, go down in hopes of starting that. So they're very interested in starting behavioral intervention team, which typically they do at a college level. There are very few high schools that do it, but I think it's really important to do it. So those are the kinds of things that he gets involved in. Again, it's not all crime, because we don't have a lot of crime there, but I think it's an important component. And then just the interaction with the students, I think is critical as well.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer. Ms. Pravetti, you're kind of looking like you want to speak. Did you want to say something? Okay. Any other fundamental or base questions before we begin our discussion? Okay, I don't see any. And so again, just a suggestion, but what my suggestion is that if we go to those pages of the staff report that Ms. Pravetti talked about in her presentation and identified as possible options for us, again, it's either page 6 or I think 67 of your packet electronically. And just ask perhaps council members which ones you may be interested in, so that we can convert those discussions to motions, hopefully, so that staff has something to go forward with. And I'm not going to arbitrarily, pick on people. So if you want to volunteer and raise your hand first, go ahead. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pretty sure that my list here is consistent with the question you asked, but we'll give it a shot. These are the issues that rose to the top for me based upon last week's community meeting and the information that we received this evening. Police oversight, modify the school resource officer if after conferring with the various school districts, make as much of the police information public as is legally allowed. Explore the use of non-police officers as I use here, reasonable or realistic. And that is it.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I'm just going to ask, maybe if that was perfect, as just a summary of what you're interested in, and then perhaps if we have things that we're all interested in, we can move to more particularized discussion on each one of those. So who's next? Mr. Rennie?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just go down the list. Let me start with the SRO, since Councilmember Spector mentioned that. I'm trying to understand why this is a topic. Is our SRO or our SRO program out of touch with what's needed at the school? Or is this, in other words, has this been brought up because somebody's not happy with it at the school? Or is this being brought up because nationally or in California or whatever, it's become an issue, so we've decided it's an issue in Los Gatos? Fundamentally, the idea of an SRO seems to make a lot of sense to me, especially if we only have to pay 50% of the salary, and that it's not, a disciplinary role. I, really like the idea of having, the backup in case of the active shooter, hopefully, which doesn't happen. But it was only last year we had active shooter in Gilroy, and we had them at schools across the country the 1 or 2 years preceding that. So we know that could come back. We haven't had any recently, maybe because of COVID. But I think it's also, part of we keep mentioning Scott Seaman started this, Scott Seaman was every officer should know everybody in town, and everybody in town should know every officer. Obviously a very hard goal, but the idea is to work towards it. And I don't see pulling an SRO out of the school seems like you're going the wrong direction. So, as Councilmember Spector said, look at modifying it, then there's this question in my mind, are we out of touch or not? So, check on that. Let me go back to the other list here. So, determine an appropriate police oversight model. Yes, go full steam with that. That sounds great. I definitely think we should look at options for providing social services for mental health or other homeless needs. Staff has a lot of questions. There's not enough information really for a direction. So my direction is yes, please go get all that information. And also, part of that, we're trying to figure out what exactly is needed and how it can be provided. And the end result is, how much does it cost? I think that, the conversation started with, let's take money away from the police so we can fund mental health. Well, it makes sense that we definitely need more mental health. Just listening to the chief talk about the services, I'm not going to get all the acronyms right, MCRI or something like that, are not always available. It sounds like the county is short in providing these services or partnering with us. So I think it's important. So clearly there's a need to increase this. We contribute to partners like Cassie, which is very important on the campuses. And your desk item, we only gave $10,000. That's not really very much. I suspect we could be giving a lot more to that, and to other organizations like Next Door Solutions and so forth. So I would like to look for places to come up with more money. I would leave it up to staff to say where that might come from. I don't necessarily going to say it has to come from police. It seems like our police department runs very lean and mean. Maybe not mean. We shouldn't use that term, right? Lean, very lean anyway. And the money may not easily be able to taken out of the police budget, even though it is a large percent. You know, I've asked the question before about, do we have the right size patrol? And, you know, the answers I was getting back was, well, if we start analyzing that, we're going to likely find our patrols too small. And I'd say when I was out campaigning last 2 years ago, you know, one of the top things people mentioned to me was, you know, there's property crimes in my neighborhood. I'd like to see the police patrol around more. You know, how come the police aren't doing more about the beach traffic in town? Why can't the police stop people from speeding around the school when they're dropping their kids off and driving dangerously? You know, I heard these over and over and over when I knocked on my usual 4,000 doors to talk to the community. So that says, yeah, our patrol probably isn't oversized. So moving on from that, next was so utilizing a non-sworn personnel. I like looking at that. You know, I don't think we understand it well enough. There more data needed to be collected and so forth, but I would move forward on that because that might be a place either to save money or to free up some officers' time for other things like the foot patrols. I love the idea of foot patrols. Again, it goes to this get to know the community, let the community know you kind of thing. But I can only see it costing us more money unless we can somehow do less calls for service because we're transitioning it to a non-sworn, and that would allow us to have more time for foot patrols. So, you know, I don't think we can afford to spend more money for foot patrols, but if we can find time to free up officers for that will continue our other goals. I think the last one on the list is identify other pioneering ideas to maintain the LGM SPD as a premier law enforcement. You know, I really want to appreciate the chief because he's really made it his priority to add to it, you know, the extra de-escalation and inherent bias training and the compassion training. I appreciate that and would want to continue to look for more opportunities to expand on that. You know, what are the best industry practices? Maybe we investigate other places also to get more ideas. Have we done, and I know we're doing those trainings, have we done enough? So I would definitely want to, you know, I'm kind of saying I like all of it. So that was a lot of comments, Mayor, hopefully good enough.
Fair enough. I'm going to turn to Councilwoman Sayah.
Thank you. So I'm going to put it in my prioritized list. Number one is police oversight to improve accountability. I think we need to do that soon. And I'm prepared to authorize the town manager to consult with Judge Cordell to look at different models. One item that I would really like in the model is an independent person that can look and analyze our data. I think a lot of us are questioning the racial statistics that were presented. And I would like an independent person to look at those, do some research, do some comparisons with the county, but also provide suggestions on how we may start to see that trend to go downward. Second, definitely I am in full support of town resources for mental health work. but I'm not yet convinced what the right model is. I appreciate the chief spending some time with me today. We talked a lot about what actually is happening within our town and the resources available. And I think there's just too many unanswered questions still. What our baseline is, what kind of calls we're getting, what kind of issues are at stake for us to determine whether we hire in-house or utilize outside agencies. But I would like staff to begin that research and that analysis to see what exactly is occurring within our town. I like the idea of the non-sworn personnel, regardless of whether or not there's a cost saving. I like the idea of using someone that is not armed to be the interface and to start doing and taking on more responsibilities in public safety. If you look at the statistics, it looks like there are many calls that can take place and have someone else, a CSO, respond to those. You know, I'm looking more at how we can de-escalate and improve perception versus cost savings. And I'm not, instead of foot patrols, one of the things I'd like is just utilizing our own staff to do just more outreach. One of the things we heard at the workshop was that when our community knows our police officers and our police officers know our community, the relationship is positive. But when there's that unknown factor is when tension starts to rise and maybe some racial profiling. So instead of putting money towards foot patrols, I'd rather have our officers and our staff at more events. So I know, I think it's called the National Watch. I know there's different ways to utilize existing groups, and I'd like to utilize that mechanism more for our town to better see and meet our officers. And the last one, pioneering ideas, I think that's always something that we're striving for, regardless of if it's our police department or any other department. I think we should always look to how we can be better versus falling on what the minimum requirements are for this town, for the state. And I would challenge all of our department heads, including our chief, to look at how we could always surpass what the minimum requirements are.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sayak. I'm going to make some brief comments and then I'm going to try something. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, then we'll move on to the next idea. I agree that oversight, and when I say oversight, I am going to define that as a third party other than the police department investigating complaints regarding the police department. I don't know what the proper model is, but I think that Judge Cordell has already given us some really good ideas and she's willing to help us on this. And so I would kind of look to her. I mentioned the SRO because I see that as a way to have a non-sworn officer or a mental health or social services component in something that we already use for budgeting. So I agree with the Vice Mayor that it's not time for us to jettison that, but it's perhaps time for us to look at that and see if that is the right model. When I heard Councilwoman Sayak talk about an independent evaluation of data analysis and Councilman Rennie talk about transparency, I kind of think of those as the same thing. So I'm looking at transparency and accountability through what we present to the public in a very transparent way about who we're arresting, what calls we're responding to, what citations get issued, what gets prosecuted, no matter how, I don't know how deep we want to go, but to me, those are transparent.
Did we lose the mayor?
Issues which I think are really important to. Did I fall out? Can you hear me?
A little bit, you did, yes.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yes, okay. I'm very much a fan of using non-sworn officers. At the September 8th meeting, we heard about calls for barking dogs or people relieving themselves in yards, or as Mr. McGregor Scholes said, perhaps a homeless person who is experiencing some difficulties somewhere. And we also heard about the incident in Bottom Park with a homeless person who may have well have been needed in need of social services, but may need something else depending on expertise. We don't know that particularly, but there's lots of calls that we can vet out and then determine if they need to get stepped up to the next level. So I would really, really, really like to use non-sworn personnel when possible to deal with calls that aren't involving some actual real live criminal activity. I'm a fan of the foot patrol. I realize that that's expensive, but I'm also a fan of creativity. So I'd like to see how that could get worked into a shift, because I think cars can be threatening. They can be anonymous. And if you just cruise around in a cop car, you really don't have any relationship except to maybe slam on your brakes because you're going too fast or duck your head or something. So, you know, I'd like to explore ways to get police out of their cars, whatever that might be. And then finally, with respect to the next idea, I view this discussion as a discussion of policing. What do we want from policing? What does policing do? What are our expectations? How can it be shaped? So if we look at the incidents around the country that have resulted in people's deaths at the Wendy's in Georgia, did the police need to be called because somebody was asleep in the Wendy's line that resulted in that person's death? You know, so what are the ways to teach ourselves and our police what is really in need of a police response and what is in need of some different kind of response? So I want us to think about that for new ideas. And more mundane, when I was in the DA's office in Alameda County, one of the things that I thought was really important that we did with the police was every couple weeks, we did a video or a meeting with the police. And this actually came up on September 8th, where we updated the police on new laws that were applicable to what they did, or court decisions that were applicable to what they did, so that when they went out in the field, they were completely aware that, for example, you cannot use a carotid hold, or somebody just decided, you know, in Santa Clara County that you can't do this, or this resulted in the case getting dismissed. And it was really helpful because we brought the police into an awareness of what the rules were on a larger basis for their conduct. And I think it really helped how they went about doing their jobs with that background information. So in addition to implicit bias and everything else, just some education on what are the actual rules that apply to your job and that now are going to affect what happens with what you do in a courtroom later on, should the person be arrested and prosecuted. So that's sort of my big idea, my mundane idea. But given that, so here's what I said I was going to try and see how it works and whether the council wants to go with it. I was going to just go ahead and make a motion on each thing where I heard what I believe to be consensus. So my first motion would be that we ask staff to pursue a model for oversight, meaning independent review of complaints against our police department, and that we authorize the town manager to work with Judge Cordell or whoever may be appropriate to bring us back ideas on that. Is there any second or discussion on that?
Second.
Okay, seconded by Mr. Rennie. Any discussion on that? Seeing none. Sorry? Yes, no? So we've got a motion on the table regarding oversight. I'm going to do a roll call. Councilman Rennie?
Yes.
Councilwoman Sapp?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Spector?
Yes.
And the mayor votes yes. Then I'm with the next thing I heard consensus on was transparency, whatever form that might take, whether it be reporting out statistics, whether it be collecting more accurately data, giving us things to compare to that are apples to apples, and then making that information available to the community. So I'm asking staff to pursue those options and report back to us. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Motion? Seconded by the vice mayor. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none. Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Councilwoman Sapp?
Yes.
Councilman Rennie?
Yes.
Okay. Then I do think, and this could be more controversial, I do think that I did hear at least a consensus to investigate the use of non-sworn personnel. So my motion would be that we investigate that, what the ramifications are for staffing and budgeting, and how they could be effectively used. So that's my next motion. Is there a second for that?
Second.
Motion? Seconded by the Vice Mayor. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none. Councilman Rennie?
Yes.
Councilwoman Sack?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Spector?
Yes.
And the mayor votes yes. Then I didn't necessarily hear, well, I think I heard consensus on exploring social use of, or how we could incorporate social services and mental health services into the town, not necessarily through the police, but how we can most effectively provide those services, whether it's through police or partnering with nonprofits or whatever it might be. Am I getting that right? I'm gonna look to the council for, so my motion is that we again ask town staff to explore the use of how we can acquire and use social services and mental health services either through and or with our police department. So is there a second? Second by Councilwoman Seah. Councilman Rennie is
Yes.
quite amused.
Yes.
Councilwoman Seah.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Spector.
Yes.
Okay. That kind of, then on the ideas going forward, I don't really think we need a motion. I think you heard the comments of the council. Ms. Petty, is that correct? And then I did not hear a consensus on foot patrol. So if anyone wants to make a motion regarding foot patrol, here's your opportunity. Okay, I don't see anyone. So I really didn't hear a consensus on that item. Is there anything that I missed or other motions that people would like to make? Okay, I don't see any. So Ms. Privetti, do you have what you need?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. And Chief DeSena, thank you for answering our questions this evening and on September 8th. So that will finish item 6 and we'll move to item 7, which is an addendum to the Police Officers Association Memorandum of Understanding and revisions to the police classifications within our temporary classification plan. It's basically an employment agreement. Who's going to give us the staff report on this?
Lisa Velasco.
Ms. Velasco? You are muted.
I'm sorry about that.
Got it.
Okay. Good evening, Lisa Velasco, Human Resources Director. For your consideration tonight is a recommendation to approve an addendum to the Police Officers Association's Memorandum of Understanding related to reopener language to negotiate salary in the third year of the agreement. Representatives of the town have met and conferred in good faith with POA within the parameters authorized by the town council and reached a tentative agreement to provide a 1% across-the-board increase effective in October, plus a one-time non-PERSable lump sum bonus amount equivalent to 2% of annual salary prior to the 1% increase. Staff is also recommending the same increase to the 2 temporary police classifications to continue the past practice of matching the current POA police officer top step rate of pay. The anticipated fiscal impact for all of the recommended salary adjustments in fiscal year 2021 is $169,605 and reduced to $82,448 for subsequent fiscal years. This concludes my report and I'm available to answer questions. Donna Williamson, partner with the labor law firm of Liebert Cassidy Whitmore, is also available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Velasco. Are there any questions? Okay, actually, I have a question that can be answered by either you, Ms. Velasco, Ms. Privetti, or our lawyer. If the council approves this evening, it's basically following through on our promise that we made prior to COVID or prior to our police discussion. And my question is, if we are to approve this, addendum, does it affect in any way the discussion that we just had regarding any kind of reforms, budgeting, or changes to our police department?
I will start and then let the other staff members add on. Thank you for the question. I think this is an independent labor issue where we bargained in good faith, consistent with the contract. And so we are bringing a package for you for your consideration tonight. So that way, you know, and it does align with what we've done with other unions within our organization. We are committed to reform and committed to the ideas that we just discussed and the 4 motions that just carried unanimously by this council. And I think, you know, our staff have that same spirit of innovation. So having a little bit of a COLA to demonstrate the value of our staff, I think will help us as we continue to innovate and look at new ideas and new expectations for our officers.
Thank you, Ms. Pavetti. Any other questions? Okay, do I have anyone that wants to speak as a member of the public on this matter? If so, you can raise your hand electronically, your little electronic blue hand. All right, seeing no one, I'm going to close the public portion of the meeting and look to the council for discussion, further questions, or a motion. Councilwoman Sayoc.
No questions. And I think it's important to share with those that are watching and questioning this, that this is a cost of living increase that we are providing to all of our employees. It's been a tough year for everyone. And so we want to make sure that all our staff, regardless of which department, is taken care of and thanked. So on that note, I move that we approve an addendum to the Police Officers Association MOU and revisions to the police classifications within the temporary classification that's contained in attachment 1 and 3.
Thank you, Ms. Sayoc. Is there a second? Mr. Rennie?
Yeah, I'll second it in just short comment. I think this is actually consistent with the discussion about the police department, number 6, and you know, some of the requests we've had to move funding from police to something else. We're actually adding funding by giving a cost of living increase, but the big question is about making sure our police department is the best it can be with the best officers, and this helps to keep us competitive and making sure that we can hire and retain officers that have the right disposition and the right mentality for policing in Los Gatos. So I feel like this is an important part of continuing how do we make our police department better. So I am seconding and supporting the motion.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions before I call the question? Okay, seeing none. Councilman Rennie?
Yes.
Councilwoman Sayoc?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Spector?
Yes.
And the mayor votes yes. It passes unanimously. That is our last action item for this evening. Is there anything else before I adjourn the meeting? Seeing nothing, those of you who might be watching or watch this later, please join us on September 29th for our next community conversation. The topic is going to be affordable housing. We hope that it's as informative, interesting, and constructive as our last one. And we look forward to what we're going to learn. So with that, good night, everyone, and thanks for joining us.